is that? What is that? What is that? What is that? What is that? Welcome to the Loudmouth Birth Advocate channel. Glad you made it. I'm a student researcher, which means I have to fact check everything I do or I flunk a class. Needless to say, I've made it a habit, so you will expect fact-checked information here on this channel. My life's work is to participate in improving maternal health and maternal health care through the childbearing year. What a new day! So, obviously, the obstetrical practices history has been bumped. Some people are interested in this particular part about the pandemic. I'm going to be talking as briefly and simply as possible about the virus, the illness the virus causes, the vaccine that helps prevent the virus, and how all of that relates to pregnancy specifically. A timely subject that frankly I should have done a video about beginning of the summer, but it is what it is. This is going to be science heavy. I'm going to try to be brief but simple and thorough and not political. Why I'm presenting it, why I think it's important, none of that is about politics. My life's work to make sure that maternal health information gets to the public and is not exclusively reserved for the professionals. They'll take care of themselves. Another point I need to make is I don't know everything. In fact, that should be a theme through all of my videos. I'm never going to know everything, but I really want to make sure that what I do know, I share, because it's not just for me. What I'm going to present today, though, is not limited to U.S. obstetrics. Eyeballs from around the world, from various different sources, contributed this information, so I trust that information better. Part of the problem with the pandemic is that research about the virus and the vaccine affect pregnancy didn't come out until later because many more people are not pregnant than are pregnant. So the bulk of the research needed to be targeted at that population, not pregnant people. So research for specifically about pregnancy ended up being later. At the end of this, I'm going to show you how I currently analyze research, because I don't take it just at the title line. That changed because I started studying research and how it's done. Just a thought. An interesting point about research is that it never proves anything, really. It only shows the result of that particular project, how that study was done, and what the limitations of that study were and our understanding at the time. Because research could and should always be updated, because we always update as a society. Just a thought. When I use the words "that makes sense to me," what I'm saying is I have filtered that through my personal thought process and my bias that I may or may not be aware of. That doesn't make it fact just because it makes sense to me. Let me start off with a little bit of information about viruses and vaccines and things like that. There's a difference between a virus and the illness that the virus causes. So for instance, tick. The tick isn't the illness. The illness is the virus that the tick carries. The illness is what makes the human sick, not the tick itself. So it's the same way with this. The coronavirus is an organism that creates symptoms in a human body, which is the illness, and that's what's treated. It's not the virus. The virus is an organism. So the SARS-CoV-2 causes the coronavirus in humans. Every illness is created from a symptom set, a set of specific predictable symptoms. Sometimes they vary depending on the illness. frankly, most illnesses are slightly varied from individual to individual. So for instance, lupus in one person might look different in somebody else. So here's what a virus does. The virus, just like us, has a DNA code that prescribes releasing or assembling certain proteins to be released or formed or whatever their function is. That virus shedding those proteins in a human body starts attacking and taking over different cells. And then they start replicating in those human cells, including things like lungs, which causes congestion or COVID pneumonia, in the brain, which causes fatigue, mental fog, or in the muscles, which causes body aches, on and on. I'm going to include in the description down below a great video that I previewed called How Viruses Work. So if you want to look more into the sciencey stuff, it'll be down there. Next, vaccine methods. Vaccines are given directly into muscles because muscles absorb things differently than fat layers do. And it kind of needs to be a big muscle, so that's going to be like your leg, or we call it the butt, but really it's the top side of the hip or in the arm. And so those are intramuscular injections. Up until recently, vaccines were given by a method called virus vector. This is science I don't understand, so this is all I'm saying. They would deactivate a part of the virus, but leave enough of it for the body to recognize what that is and react to it. And so this was done with basically all of the vaccines that we know up to this point, whether it's DTaP or Tdap, it's the same thing. Diphtheria, tetanus, polio, anything that you put in the body that's decomposable and you need to maintain the original form, it has to have a preservative. So up till recent years, that included a metal called thimerosal, which is basically mercury. It's one of the key reasons why anti-vaxxers have been against vaccines as a whole. Mercury introduced to the body is not necessarily a good thing. So over the last several decades, research has been ongoing, has already been in the process, and was just starting to finish just in the last year or two about a different way to deliver vaccines. And this new method is based on the DNA of the virus and not the virus organism itself. That research has been going on for over 20 years. I verified it myself. This is not new research. It didn't start getting developed in 2018-19. It's very well researched information. This vaccine has reduced its ingredients. It enables the reduction of ingredients and it eliminates harmful ingredients. So in fact, I verified with several different sources of information, several different organizations. The ingredients for this are, and I'm going to read it, literally lipids, which are fats, salts, sugars, and buffers. And I searched every single one of those ingredients on what are they used for. None of them are dangerous for the human body. Wow. If all the vaccines could be made this way, vaccines would be so much safer. For thousands of years, medicine has understood things like homeopathy. The key concept is the idea that like cures like, but in small, minute doses. So to get rid of nausea, you take something that will encourage the body to fight against nausea. Sounds like immunization. So now with this new science, it's just exciting for me personally. Another one of the concerns that anti-vaxxers have had about the contents of vaccines is this particular thing has been used in this dangerous thing. Oxygen is used in hydrogen peroxide. Oxygen is not bad, but you really don't want to drink hydrogen peroxide because that's dangerous. It doesn't make oxygen dangerous. Some interesting things to learn if you want to see the science of this messenger RNA aspect of the DNA of viruses in vaccines. Also linked below is another video by the SciShow about the research that has been done. Fabulous stuff that helps me learn is if I can get an analogy or an image in my head about something. Maybe this will help. So for instance, if I thought of the virus as a skin biopsy, I'm taking a piece of my organism out of my body to use for whatever. Versus if I take a tiny piece and strip down to the DNA of my skin, that's different. It's not a whole. Here's a better one. My face. This is my whole face. If you saw my face, you would recognize me. Those that know me, if they saw my name, just my name, they wouldn't need to see my face. They still recognize who I am from my name. That's what the science is trying to do, is to get the body to recognize it on simpler terms without introducing a foreign body. Let's get into the virus. Illnesses and diseases across the board, medicine has seen in research, always more intensely and more often affect non-white people. And obstetrics knows that pregnancy puts people more at risk. That's why a lot of pregnant people are told, don't eat certain kinds of fish, don't eat unpasteurized meat, don't eat all these things, because not only is it a protection of the baby, but it's also a protection of the pregnant person. Another couple of tidbits that are important about pregnancy is that the immune system during pregnancy changes. Additionally, the heart and lungs, and frankly almost all of the organs, but specifically the heart and lungs, function differently during pregnancy, which put pregnant people more at risk, especially for an airborne virus. The good thing is that anything that a pregnant person is exposed to and develops antibodies and immunity for gets passed on to the baby. So the research about the virus and the vaccine, I looked at several different sources: medical, educational, government. Here's an important thing about research. You could think of this as the placebo and treatment effect, or you could think of it as regular people and those that are exposed, or pregnant people that are healthy and pregnant people that are sick. The level of side effects or symptoms or anything like that for pregnancy could be a little bit different, but across the board for all of this research, the differences are significantly increased chance for hospitalizations, serious illness, and beyond that, there was an increase in pre-eclampsia, miscarriage, preterm labor, premature rupture of membranes, stillbirth, death. Interestingly enough, it more often happened during the first trimester and the third trimester, not as much in the second trimester. There was research published in Clinical Infectious Diseases that showed that there was an increased bad outcome of many situations, including being put on a ventilator, blood clots, cardiac and renal failure, C-section, ICU admission. Very similar results were published by the Canadian Medical Association, by JAMA. No, it's the Journal of the American Medical Association, and by Obstetrics and Gynecology. So, looks very repeatable. Under most circumstances, this would become what's called theory, because if it's repeatable results, then it needs to be trusted. On one of the studies, there wasn't very much impact on the placenta, which is great because the placenta is a filter. It's much like the human liver. The placenta adds an additional filter for the baby. Newborns, they may have experienced some additional negative outcomes, but not to a significant degree. The pandemic started 18 months ago now. I mean, that's definitely worth at least 2 pregnancies of time right there. But since there is not a high percentage of the population that gets pregnant at any given time, being able to research that with any regularity, for research to be able to look at the time period of the illness versus the time period of a pregnancy, it's a lot longer than COVID. So some outcomes take time to see, but with enough volume, and there was an article that was a review of several studies So the number of women being studied, pregnant or not, was like over 100,000. That's a pretty significant number of people. So that is one of the criteria of things that I look at on an article about a research project, is how big is the sample size. So if you're studying 15 women versus 15,000, that's a big difference. And a bigger sample size of people to study is always better. The level of significance and the difference of what's being looked at. There could be some difference, yeah, but it needs to be a significant difference, not just different. Under different circumstances, this situation, it's hard to get picky about this particular issue, but funding. This is kind of pros and cons. For instance, an educational association won't be interested in researching how buildings are built. They're going to be interested in how education is done. So they would be more likely to fund that kind of education. But the whole point about the funding is, are there any conflicts of interest? That I look for. Because if there are conflicts of interest, it would be a really good idea to cite in the article that there was a conflict of interest and this is how they resolved it. This is how they worked out it not being an issue with performing the actual research project, and how they deal with missing data. So, for instance, if I passed out a survey, but not all of the surveys came back, and on top of that, the ones that did come back, not all of them are complete, I've lost some data there. Research and statistics has a way of adjusting the numbers so that it's still correct, but not biased. So, the virus and the vaccine during pregnancy comes down to risk and benefit. Is it worth the risk, and is it worth the benefit? Since there's a higher chance of getting really sick or worse during pregnancy versus taking a vaccine that has become very much safer, just in its method has become safer, even though there's still been 2 pregnancies worth of time looking at all of this data. So, what's next? Yes, finally, the history, a brief, because you wouldn't want to hear a 2-hour lecture on here, would you? A brief history of obstetrical practices since the beginning of obstetrics in America. That one's already almost finished being edited as we speak. So that will definitely come out in a week, maybe less, depending on how anxious I am for you all to get the information. After that, I've been hinting at this. I can't wait. Another clue that I might be able to give. I've said before that there is a former Disney child star in this movie on Netflix related to maternal health, and I guess I could say that there's a princess in it. Needless to say, this video is going to be recorded hopefully sometime soon, depending on my school load. I'm going to do a reaction to this video. That's coming up, and I'm excited about that. Following this little bit, there's going to be a screen of resources, including articles and website if you are a science nerd, medical nerd, but more education is always great. Just a thought. But definitely, please be kind to all your fellow human beings, no matter their diversity. YouTube, you've probably been here before. This symbol is your voting ballot. Let me know what you think of the content of this video. Comment section down below as a community to talk with each other as well as me. If you click subscribe, it becomes an easy way to find more of my videos as well as the recommended playlist that I have down below. Feel free to share these videos with other people. Be a voice of this information. So what's unique about this channel? What's new? Anything that you see different about me, the background, those all count as what's new. But why play that gimmick? I've got a purpose. I want to pass on the information. And education starts with critical thinking. Critical thinking does not mean being a judgmental person. It means being able to look at something and not take it as face value. Look at it, analyze it. That's critical thinking, and that's where education starts.